What's up, First Take fam? Thank you so much for being with us. Remember to catch us weekdays, 10 a.m. Eastern on ESPN. So much to get into on this hump day. How long before Magic Johnson turns the Lakers into championship contenders? And should Kobe now join Magic in the Lakers front office? Plus, after a rough season, is Cam Newton's NFL stock on the decline? Let's get it started. And somebody is hype on a Wednesday. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being with us here on First Take. Max, always good to have you back here in Bristol with me. Stephen A. Smiling. How we doing?
What's up, y'all? What's up? Hey, Max. Hey,
Yo.
Max. How's Bristol?
It's just fine here.
I mean, it's a little chilly out here in L.A. I think it's, the sun is coming up. It's 3 hours behind you. It's a little chilly out here in L.A. It's about 6 to 7 degrees.
It's lovely in Connecticut this time of year, as anyone can tell you.
I'm just saying. I just thought I'd let you know that. I'm telling y'all right now. I'm about to move out here. I'm getting me a crib out here. I'm tired of this. It's beautiful. It's been a beautiful day, beautiful city. Hey, Molly, you used to work in L.A. too. Hey, yeah. you are right in Bristol. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I used to live there until you had me do this show.
I lived there about 4 years, and then I came out for this job called First Take. Yeah,
oh, really?
In Bristol,
really?
Yes, it was a great opportunity.
Listen, it's a great opportunity. I do understand that. I'm certainly sensitive to that, but at the same time, y'all are there. I'm in Hollywood. It seems appropriate.
Fitting.
Seems appropriate.
So fitting. Well, Stephen A., you asked and you received. The Lake Show is now the Magic Show. So Lakers president Jeannie Buss finally pulling the trigger, naming Magic Johnson their new president of basketball operations while firing both longtime GM Mitch Kupchak, who's with the team for 30 years, and her brother, executive vice president of basketball operations Jim Buss. So at 19-39, the Lakers have the NBA's third worst record. They're coming off a franchise worst 17-65 season and have missed the playoffs for 3 straight seasons, the longest postseason drought in franchise history. Clearly not the Lakers basketball that we had come accustomed to. Stephen A., can Magic save the Lakers?
Well, first of all, he already has. He already has, because he brings instant credibility to one of the most storied franchises in the history of sports. Just by mere virtue of the fact that Magic Johnson is now calling the shots as president of basketball operations, and it is no longer Jim Buss, a model of ineptitude, a model of inefficiency, a model of incompetence, all because of his emotions and then some. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that Jim Buss is running basketball operations. Jeannie Buss is the governor for the Los Angeles Lakers, meeting with the Board of Governor meetings. She is the one that represents the franchise. She is ultimately the boss. They are brother and sister running the Lakers organization and have not even spoken since November 1st. I mean, that's how pathetic this situation has been. It is how dysfunctional it has been. And look at the record since Dr. Jerry Buss, God rest his wonderful soul, passed away in February of 2013. What is their record? They're 27-55. They're 21-61. They're 17-65, and now they've got the third worst record in the NBA in 19-39. Now, primarily, we understand that Kobe Bryant was hurt, and if Kobe Bryant were not hurt, they certainly would not have been that awful. We do understand and recognize that. But the level of ineptitude exercised by Jim Buss, the dysfunctionality that sifted through this franchise like a virus, the combination of Jim Buss and Jeannie Buss turning off prospective free agents like LaMarcus Aldridge walking out on a meeting, like Kevin Durant even refusing to take a phone call from the franchise. The list goes on and on. They have been a model of incompetence. They have been a laughingstock. They have been embarrassing in every way imaginable. So the mere presence alone of Magic Johnson says to Laker Nation, we are taking this seriously. It's no longer a family affair. We're not going to sit up there and sacrifice the credibility of this franchise and Laker Nation because of sibling love for one another or our love for our father. Therefore, we have to try to get along. We're going to shove all of that aside, and we're going to put the interest of Laker Nation first. The hiring of Magic Johnson instantly instantly establishes that. Still got to do the job. Spoke to Bill Plaschke, the voice of Los Angeles yesterday, Max Kellerman. He's cautiously optimistic as to the job that Magic Johnson is going to do. And we recognize Magic Johnson still has to do the job. We get that. But at least we know somebody is going to be in position, literally attempting to do the job, as opposed to stabbing and taking jabs at a sister or a brother, or putting family rivalries ahead of the interest of Laker Nation. It's instant credibility. Once again, we can look at the purple and gold pride. We can understand we have a license to expect something other than ineptitude, and we are moving forward. You are there. I am here. It is Los Angeles. It is Lala. It is Irvin Magic Johnson, reestablishing that basketball will be the primary focus of this basketball organization, and not two siblings butting heads like immature little brats at one another. That's what happened yesterday.
Can Magic turn it around? Can he bring the Lakers back to championship contention?
I think so, eventually.
The answer is yes, but he's got to be willing to do what he has to do, and what he has to do is tank right now. Is Magic willing to do that? Look, just because you're great at one thing, in Magic's case playing basketball, doesn't mean that those skills translate to the front office. Now, Phil Jackson just hasn't put in the effort, but he was arguably the greatest coach of all time, and he's arguably the worst executive of all time, right? Magic will put in the effort. He said on this show, and there's no reason to not believe him, that that his other businesses are up and running. He'll leave other people in charge of those, and he will focus, he said, 150% on the Lakers. And if he does that, he'll be ahead of Phil Jackson. But is he willing to do what the Lakers need him to do? Tank, not stank. Stank, which means tanking by stinking, not on purpose. That's what the Lakers have been doing in recent years. They've been stanking. Tanking because they stink, not always on purpose. They need to lose every game for the rest of this season. And how do you develop your young players, your core, D'Angelo Russell, Brandon Ingram, etc.? When you're losing all those games, it's not easy, especially for a guy as competitive as Magic. But if they fall out of the top 3 in the draft lottery, and even if they lose every game, they still have a danger of falling out of the top 3. If they fall out of the top 3 in this draft lottery, people, I don't want to go over the details, just accept my representation. They lose a top 3 pick this year, and they lose their first-round pick in 2019. So it is imperative that they lose as many games as possible to give themselves as many lottery balls as possible to give themselves the best chance to pick in the top 3. And then once they do, Stephen A. Smith, Lonzo Ball. A big playmaking, three-point shooting guard like Magic Johnson, minus the three-point shots, and some of the size, who plays for UCLA, a guy like that. They need to target someone in the draft. Come hell or high water, they got to land that guy in the draft. Magic has got to be willing to tank this season. Now, there's nothing he can do about the contracts of Mozgov or Luol Deng right now, which were incredibly foolish contracts. Those were long-term, high-price deals. Combined, they make $34 million a year.
Why don't you just
for
tell
3
us the
more
sky
seasons?
is blue?
What's that?
We all know that. $70 million for Deng, $65 million for Mozgov. Everybody and their grandmother knows those are bad contracts.
By the way, as was Kobe's final contract that the Lakers gave him, the only upside to that turned out to be that the Lakers stunk bad enough that they got to draft D'Angelo Russell and Brandon Ingram. But the fact was, Kobe was coming off of a catastrophic injury at the time.
There you go.
Before he ever stepped out onto a court, they saddled themselves with salary cap problems.
There you go.
They did a similar thing with Mozgov and Deng for different reasons. If Magic Johnson is clear-eyed about this, and he might be, he knows the analytics department needs a lot of work on the Lakers. He's said as much. If he's clear-eyed about this and does what he needs to do, he can turn it around. If, however, he really means things like he's tweeted about how good Rajon Rondo's been the last couple of years, what a good move it was when teams have picked him up, where it was clearly a bad move every time and everyone in basketball knew it, then not so much. But if instead he was saying that because he has, he knows Rondo, he wants to say good things, but he's willing to be clear-eyed about this, he can turn them around. It will take time.
Hasn't he already made that step, though, in that direction of tanking, trading Lou Williams, the team's leading scorer? Isn't that a step towards
That it is a step towards it. Corey Brewer actually is on the books for another year, but they're not going to be great next year anyway.
You did it to get the first-round pick.
Probably a mid-20s first-round pick. And Brewer, in 15 minutes a game, can play some defense off your bench.
Here's the deal. Your vision is all wrong. And you're holding an executive accountable for the wrong thing. Of course, if you get picks, you want to utilize them effectively. That's where your analytics department in combination with your scouting department comes into play. But there's a couple of things that you need to understand, and this is why the Phil Jackson element comes into play. And I can't wait to touch on my final take today. Wait till y'all hear what my final take is. Oh, my Lord, I'm just going to save it for y'all. But here's the deal. Let's think about this with Magic Johnson. I don't give a damn about no draft picks right now. You know what I want to see? I want to see prospective free agents showing an interest in coming to L.A. That's what I want to see. You're not getting success based on the draft picks alone. Magic Johnson ain't trying to be Sam Hinkie Part 2, okay, throwing seasons at a time because we want to trust the process and charging patrons while throwing 3 or 4 seasons at a time. That ain't going to be Magic Johnson. LA's not going to tolerate that. You have to show an ability to go out there and attract marquee free agents by selling the purple and gold, selling the tradition, selling Magic Johnson and the Los Angeles Lakers.
You gotta pay him too. Hold on.
What?
LaMarcus Aldridge would have been a terrible idea for these Lakers. These baby Lakers with a 30-year-old star who's not good enough to take you to the promised land.
You're going away from my point.
Carmelo Anthony would have been a terrible idea for these Lakers.
That's not the point I was making.
You have to sign the right free agents.
That's not the point I was making. It's not. Of course, it's got to be the right free agent.
What's
the wrong one?
You brought up LaMarcus Aldridge.
No, I'm saying to you what you have to do is be attractive enough where you're turning guys down. They're not turning you down to the point where they're not even visiting you or walking out on you. That's the point that I'm trying to make. You have to put yourself in a situation where you're such an attractive commodity. If you're talking about Lakers lore and you're talking about greatness from the past, you have to be that franchise that everybody's clamoring to go to. And the way to do that is establishing a respectable foundation and feed off a lot of sunshine and everything else too.
You think that they should not tank this season, so they're going to lose their top 3 pick and their 2019 pick.
No, that's
Meantime, hold on. Meantime, you got $34 million a year on the books to Mozgov and Deng, which means you can't have 3 superstars meet up. It's only 2, and those 2 better be good enough that when they look at each other, they think our combined forces, we can actually maybe win a title together. There aren't that many guys like that.
And
so
my response
what kind of plan is that?
My response to you is you talking, you ain't listening. I'm telling you, Max Kellerman, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm saying the priority has to be is making yourself attractive enough where you're coveted and you get to make those choices. The Los Angeles Lakers went out and they gave up these bogus contracts to bogus individuals to some degree because guess what? There's so much they could attract because everybody knew that Jeannie Buss and Jim Buss were at the helm. It was dysfunctional, it was embarrassing, and it was well chronicled. No one wanted to come to play for this organization. But if you establish yourself with an elevated level of credibility, as a result, you get to pick and choose what you can do.
What I'm saying is there's no one player who's going to swoop in and save these Lakers in the next year or 2. It's not going to happen. Much better to continue to build at this point a core of prospective young stars so that as they mature and the time is right, you can't rush these things in several years. At that point, that crop of free agents looks and goes, I want to play with those guys.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So since you say that, right? Since you say that, Max Kellerman, what if Russell Westbrook and Paul George said, I want to go to L.A.? That doesn't change everything?
Yes, it does. If Russell Westbrook and Paul George want to meet up in L.A., that changes everything, sure.
What I'm saying to you is that why would you want to do that if you consider the franchise an L?
Well, can I tell you something else? That would change things, but let's be honest. Is Russell Westbrook and Paul George a championship? Because Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook and Serge Ibaka and others weren't a championship despite multiple years together. So is the point to build a championship nucleus?
It's about being competitive.
No, it's about championships in LA.
You're 19-39.
No.
You were 17-65 last year. You got to be in the picture.
Nope.
You got to be in the dance.
That is wrong-headed. In LA, the fans don't want the Clippers' second-round playoff futility. They don't want to be relevant. Lakers fans expect and demand championship dynasties, not just one.
That is not accurate. That is not accurate. And I can prove it. I can prove it. Before the Kobe Shaq era, why was Jerry West having tears streaming down his face? Why was the city of Los Angeles so excited, even though this team was going out in the first or second round? Because Nick Van Exel and Eddie Jones and Eldon Campbell and those boys went out and played their hearts out and reminded Laker Nation what it was like to compete. It's not always about the championship when you stink.
No.
Sometimes it's rising again. It's rising again. You got to crawl before you walk.
That was very different. That was them recognizing the Bulls have a dynasty. We're not going to do anything about this without Magic Johnson.
Now you're bringing that up. I thought you just said it was championship. Now you're bringing up the Bulls.
Wait a minute. So what they did is they constructed a roster, a fun roster, a competitive roster, but a flexible one, so that when Kobe presented himself in the draft, when Shaq was up for free agency,
which is what
they were
just said,
flexible enough to pounce on those guys. But when you commit dollars over long term to second-tier stars, you are not flexible enough to pounce on the real stars when they present themselves.
Ain't nobody said anything about committing dollars to second-tier dudes. Nobody said anything about that. You changing the narrative. But go ahead, Mom.
We got to leave it there. And we know L.A.
DeMar DeRozan, would you have given him a max deal? Because that's a second-tier star. Okay.
No.
Okay, just checking.
We know LA fans are pretty impatient, but they've had to be very patient with this next move. So the move of relieving Jim Buss from president of basketball operations was a long time coming. You saw Stephen A's elation at the top of the show. But, of course, when it's family business, it's never easy for anybody. Jeannie Buss admits having some regrets on waiting so long.
This was a very difficult decision. It was probably so hard for me to make that I probably waited too long. And for that, I apologize to Laker fans. But now with clarity and direction and after talking with Irvin, really knowing that a change was needed, and that's why we're here today.
Max, so Jeannie did what she had to do, but should she be vilified for taking so long in making this move?
The answer is no. And I know I was just up here arguing, look, this Mozgov and Luol Deng contract, had it been a different front office, maybe those contracts don't exist, saddled them with a salary cap issue, and that's worse than it might have been. I get that. And Boogie Cousins was just traded for a ham sandwich, and I don't believe that the only thing holding it up was Brandon Ingram. There's no way you could negotiate a better deal. I mean, the deal that was eventually had for Boogie Cousins didn't include anything like a Brandon Ingram, so even a potential draft pick. So all those things argue that she waited too long. And, in fact, Jeannie Buss just said it. And yet here I am, Stephen A. Smith, saying, no, she didn't. There are extenuating circumstances here. I think what Jeannie just did, if it's a zero-sum game, hero or villain, she's a hero here. She had to do something very difficult, something that really required guts and is understandable why it took this long, because it's one thing to say you'll do it, it's another thing to do it. She just fired her brother. And it is barely an exaggeration to say that her father, the late, great Dr. Jerry Buss, a bona fide genius, and to me, clearly, I'd happily have this debate with anyone, the greatest owner by far in the history of American team sports, and I'm a Yankees fan, and yes, that includes Steinbrenner. It's an easy call, Dr. Buss, number one. His dying wish, essentially, barely an exaggeration, and if the Buss family is watching, I apologize for putting it this way. I know it's a difficult thing to hear. But basically, his dying wish, the patriarch's dying wish, was he wants to leave his children in these certain positions, and he wants the family to reconcile in such a way that that situation leads to success for the franchise. And so it is understandable that Jeannie, a chip off the old block, wanted to give her brother, when their father wanted this arrangement, every single chance to succeed, and in this case, fail. And ideally, optimally, she should have gotten rid of him a couple years ago. Sure, optimally, he should have never had the job, as it turns out. But I think what she did took guts, and I will not vilify her for waiting as long as she did.
You're wrong, and I will vilify her. I don't do it joyfully, but she deserves to be criticized. The word vilify might be too strong because Jeannie Buss is an absolutely wonderful and lovely woman. And she knows business as well, and she deserves to be respected. But she does deserve to be criticized for this, and I'm going to tell you why. Regardless of what your daddy wanted, he didn't want this. He didn't want the Lakers to be this inept. Let's keep in mind, as Bill Plaschke of the Los Angeles Times reminded me yesterday, that Jim Buss wasn't even involved with basketball. he was involved with the horses. He wasn't even involved with basketball. I had people joking around, and they were dead serious, swearing to me that sometimes during games, he was down the block at Hooters. I mean, this dude, and then when you consider some of the decisions that were made that were just flagrantly and flat out embarrassing, all right? And then you consider the reason behind it, that it had nothing to do with basketball. It was about making sure that he proved himself. It was about making sure that Phil Jackson wouldn't be allowed to ingratiate himself within the Lakers organization. It was about going against the grain and going against his sister. None of the things I mentioned to you had anything to do with basketball. And ultimately, that's what his responsibility was. So there was a flagrant dereliction of duty that he had exercised for years. Jeannie Buss didn't address it. Furthermore, what makes this even more poignant, Jim Buss said years ago, I need 3 years to turn this around. 3 years was last year. He should have been going last year. He asked for the 3 years. He got the 3 years. He failed miserably in those 3 years. That should have been enough. Jeannie Buss still did not make a move. And at the end of the day, what it comes down to is this. Whether it's 17, 18, I don't know the exact number of the attendance at the Staples Center on a nightly basis, the purple and gold, the paraphernalia, and all the stuff that comes with it. Laker Nation has stood tall and supported this organization through thick and thin for many, many years, from the days of Jack Kent Cooke to Dr. Jerry Buss. They deserved better. And if you can't do it for them, it damn sure needed to be for a better reason, that I needed to look out for my brother because of my father's wish, when you know part of your father's wish was to make sure that this organization never nosedived. And that's exactly what happened, and it wasn't because of incompetence. It was because this man's ego got in the way of whatever basketball judgment that he had. He put that ahead of his own interest. And to his last breath, Max, look how he went out yesterday. What did they say? What did the report say? Jim Buss and Mitch Kupchak are sitting there trying to negotiate a deal for DeMarcus Cousins. They did it behind Jeannie's back. Didn't consult with her, consulted and polled lower level dudes, but not going to let the governor of the team, weigh in on the decision. These are the kind of things that he was doing for years.
Yes,
Jeannie knew it and did nothing about it. That's on her.
The dominoes started to fall, and everyone knew, and this happened. I mean, universally, it was said this is now a 5-year setback. That was the amount of time everyone said. They traded for Chris Paul. They hung on to Bynum and traded for Chris Paul. They were going to use Bynum to get Dwight Howard, which is what wound up happening. Pau Gasol and Lamar Odom for Chris Paul. And they saved $20 million in the process. In fact, Jim and Mitch at the time made such a great trade that Dan Gilbert and others, Dan Gilbert and others were so critical of the trade, they actually put in writing, the Lakers ripped off everyone so bad, they got the best player and saved $20 million, that Stern came in and turned it down. Now, wait a minute. If Jeannie Buss is in New York at the owners' meeting and the atmosphere is such that trade won't fly, that's as much on her to get in touch with them as vice versa. The problem was communication, not just Jim Buss and Mitch Kupchak's ineptitude. Because had that trade gone through and it was approved by all parties, the entire course of events is different. As for their
You just proved my point.
But that's also on Jeannie.
In other words, what you're saying is that's another reason to criticize her.
No, we're talking about did she wait too long to fire him? Is that the criticism?
Max, you bring up the trade. Hold on. You bring up the point about, okay, he makes the deal for Chris Paul. It was in the aftermath of LeBron going to South Beach. They knew the tenor of the owners. You don't sit up there and get the best player while saving $20 million in cap space and think that's a deal that's going to fly.
You're getting mad at them for making a great trade.
Jordan Rodgers from The Bachelorette, former Vanderbilt quarterback, and also the brother of that bad man, Aaron Rodgers, who came with some serious quarterback predictions. Rodgers, now also a college football analyst with the SEC Network and a host for ESPN Radio, saying he would take Kirk Cousins over the former NFL MVP, Cam Newton.
Yes, he had an MVP year. Yes, they went 15-1. Yes, I believe he is the most talented physical specimen at that position in the history of the game. But there are a lot of good defensive coaches out there. You know what gets figured out? Athleticism. Kirk's had 2 full seasons, both over 4,000 yards, both over 2-to-1 interception ratio, both above 67 completion percentage. I'm just talking about those are top 10 quarterback numbers. Cam Newton had an unbelievable year, one of the most historic years of all time. 35 touchdowns. You can't argue against how talented he is. But you take every other season that he's been a starter, and it's in the middle of the pack. Cam Newton, his best throw is better than anybody's best throw. I'm going to say that right off the bat. But I will take consistency over volatile play any day of the week.
So Rodgers doesn't even think Cam is a top 10 quarterback. Joining us now, a man who knows a lot about elite quarterbacks, spending much of his career with them, Jeff Saturday. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Jeff, how much has Cam's stock dropped over the last season?
It has not dropped to me. I mean, listen, here's the Panthers' formula for winning, right? And we'll stack these in order. Defense, run game, play action pass. Those are the 3 points, right? You need to manage that. You need to understand that. Last year in defense, 21st, 26th in scoring defense. By the way, they ran 58% of their plays when they went to the Super Bowl with the lead. Past year, 45%. So you're running over half your plays behind. Tell me how rushing game and play action work when you're losing, all right? Now, I get he didn't have a great year. The guy takes a ton of shots now, a ton. And I understand against the Falcons, he made a bad decision, pulled off all those kinds of things. Every player has made ill-advised decisions. I'm not saying every one of his decisions is perfect. But what this guy gives you, whether he's in the pocket, whether he's outside the pocket, whether it's the read-run game, whether it's the screen game, whatever it is, he gives you so much more than other quarterbacks in our game. Now, does he need to work on parts of his craft? Absolutely. His accuracy, I'm one of the ones who criticize the most, right? I mean, people are talking about Victor Cruz potentially going there. The reason they got a bunch of really tall, long receivers, their range helps him, right? When he throws those jump balls, they can do that. But to pretend that he's not a special quarterback, I didn't say athlete, I said quarterback, I think is silly. What you're asking him to do to carry an offense, this offensive line is average at best. I think you saw that really get exposed in the Super Bowl, but definitely got exposed last year. And the way they were trying to take care of themselves when you're rushing it and you're averaging 4 yards a carry, that's 20th in the league, 4 yards a carry. You would not think the Carolina Panthers are built that way. Now, again, if you're asking your quarterback to throw it 50 times a game, you know you want a Tom Brady, a Peyton Manning, right? You want a guy dialed in. That's all he works on. But this is not all you're asking Cam Newton to do is be pinpoint accurate. You're asking him to run the ball, tote the team, do all these different things. And so I disagree completely with Jordan and where he is about his stock falling.
First of all, he had 45 touchdowns a year ago. I don't care how you get him on the ground, in the air. Touchdowns are touchdowns. Worth the same number of points. It's not like, oh, he ran it in. Only give him 3 points for that one. Right? 45 touchdowns. Now, as with most quarterbacks, as with every quarterback, they get too much credit for the team's success, and they are discredited out of proportion when the team struggles. They went 15-1 and showed up in the Super Bowl. He was voted MVP.
Yep.
And people forget this already. In June or July, there was a player poll. Who's the best player in football?
Right.
Was it Tom Brady? No. Aaron Rodgers? No. A group of his peers said Cam Newton was the best player in football. Not who I want to start a franchise with, the best player in football. Now, was he? Maybe, maybe not. But we know he's not a bum.
No.
We know that a 6-win season isn't because of Cam Newton. That much we know. Now, has his stock fallen, and how much has it fallen? A lot. And by the way, buy low when a stock falls.
Absolutely.
Because at this moment, even if you think it was overvalued at the end of last year, it is severely undervalued this year. Let me tell you something, Kirk Cousins will never be voted by his peers the best player in football. Just doesn't have that upside.
Right.
I mean, but Cam Newton does. And I got to tell you something. Before that Super Bowl, I thought of him as like Mickey Mantle. I thought of him as one of these athletes who's going along at a pretty good level. And will he ever really fulfill his ultimate potential? And then 1 year for Mickey Mantle, it was 1956, as it turns out.
Yeah.
And for Cam Newton, it was last year. He's like a Triple Crown winner. And now, he wasn't able to sustain it. A lot of that is the team and not Cam. Some of it's Cam. But if you think Cam isn't a bad, Stephen A., a bad man, you are mistaken.
So, in other words, Max, Cam's stock has fallen.
Yes, it has.
Is that what you said? Okay.
Yep.
Because I was just making sure. I heard a lot of superlatives about him. I mean, but you're saying the stock is falling.
It's undervalued.
That's really where we're getting to. What we're getting to is the fact that, look, we ain't having no conversation about Kirk Cousins compared to Cam Newton. Kirk Cousins needs to show me that he can show up in big games, win a playoff game, show up in big games that really count as opposed to padding your numbers. I like Kirk Cousins, but I need to see more from him in pressurized moments before he can even be in a conversation with Cam Newton. That's just how I feel about it. Having said all of that, that's a different subject. The question is, has Cam Newton's stock fallen? And the fact of the matter is that answer would be yes. Last year was a very tough year. You go from 15-1 to 6-8 as a starter, okay? And the team goes 6-10. That's bad. When you throw 14 interceptions and just 19 touchdowns, that's very average. When you complete, 52% of his passes, 53% of his passes, that's not great, all right? That's not Tim Tebow-ish, my friend, but still, he struggled throwing. That's what it is. And so when I look at it from that perspective, I'm saying to myself, look, I hope that Cam, even though I thought that they could have done a better job coaching, I think that your GM letting go Josh Norman, not having any quality replacement ready to go in that secondary severely compromised their defense, put the offense on its heels, put them, having them, forcing them to have to engage in an uphill climb. I didn't think that was good. That's not all Cam. But we can't ignore, look at the numbers, 53% passing, all right, completions. 3,500 yards, 19 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, a QBR of 53. We have to recognize the fact that this same Cam Newton has only completed better than 60% of his passes once in his entire career. We have to look at that, and we have to sit up there and say, based off of that and what happened last year, you are going to have people looking at Cam Newton right now and questioning whether or not he's still that dude. I believe he is. You guys believe he is. But the questions are legitimate nevertheless.
See, I disagree with that they're legitimate. The whole dynamic of football is complementary. And when you're running the type of offense that the Panthers run, he can't drop back, and you can't expect their team to score 28 points a game. That's not how they're built. So his touchdowns may never be the 35, the 40 again or whatever, but that doesn't mean that it's because of what he has done. So people say, oh, it's Cam Newton's fault. To your point, Josh Norman leaving, the way their defense was operating, it was poor. So why not take chances at trying to do things to Cam that hadn't been done to him the year before? Because you got no fear. If you're a 25th plus defense and then scoring, you're not stopping anybody.
But let me ask you a question.
Ask Cam to keep doing things you can't do.
Then answer the question straight up and down. Do you think that Cam Newton
stock is falling?
Had a down year?
Yes or no? I think the Panthers. I know the Panthers.
I'm asking you about Cam. Do you think he had a down year?
No, I think not at all. I think because of what he was asked to do, it exposed areas. Listen, if the year before that he was MVP, if their defense was that bad, I don't think his numbers are any different. I think all of it is interrelated. That's my point. Everybody wants to single out
quarterback value,
you're taking out Cam Newton as a player and saying, listen, and once you're pressing and you're asking him to press, that's my point, is people go, yeah, his stock's falling, because you're asking him to do something that he's not equipped or capable of doing. That's the problem. He doesn't have the same weapons. He doesn't have the same system. Listen, go to Washington where you're talking about Kirk Cousins. That ball will be out of his hands in 3 seconds. He ain't taking 150, 140, 150 hits.
So what Cam was asked to do this year, he wasn't asked to do the year before?
No, he was asked to do much more last year than he was in 2015. Much more. He was asked much more. I mean, turn the tape on. When you're losing over half of the time that you're trying to score, the emphasis goes on to offense, and you begin to press. You don't have the quality line or receivers.
By the way, the receivers weren't exactly running crisp routes, to say the least.
Thank you. That's my point, is the system's not built for that.
The best receivers, the tight end, the best back is Cam Newton, the quarterback.
Right. That's trouble.
Let's keep it moving, guys. Stephen A., don't be upset. But the Bears are actively looking to trade your favorite quarterback, Jay Cutler, according to our Jeff Darlington. So teams around the league have now been made aware of Cutler's availability as the Bears attempt to garner draft compensation for their 8-year starter. And those conversations are expected to heat up during next week's scouting combine. Stephen A., I'm going to make a committed journalism cardinal sin here and ask you a double-barreled question. Should any team want Jay Cutler? And if so, how much should he be worth?
Well, first of all, I mean, well, he's worth a box of cookies, as he has shown us, when he was on the boat with his wife, growing more and more rotund. So we understand.
It's a slow build right now.
What did Alec Baldwin say when he imitated Donald Trump? Very heavy. That's how we see Jay Cutler right now. Okay, so let's be very, very clear. But the flip side to it, should a team look at him? Look, Jay Cutler can play. Jay Cutler has the requisite talent. Of course, some teams should look at him. It just shouldn't be as a starter. And here's why, Jeff. This is my belief about Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler is the worst quarterback in football to me. And I'm not talking about his talent. I'm talking about the requisite responsibilities that everyone has taught me. All the NFL aficionados have taught me that come with the quarterback position. He is the most flagrant, leaderless commodity at the quarterback position in the NFL as a starter. I don't care what anybody says. There's nothing about him that's inspirational. There's nothing about him that galvanizes the troops. Everybody that plays for him, the second they get away from Chicago, they talk about how leaderless he is and what a leaderless individual he is. The coaches gave you that impression because they were looking to move in a different direction during the season. Now that the season is over, they've accentuated that point by shopping him. That's my issue with Jay Cutler. I'm not questioning his arm strength. I'm not questioning his talent. I'm not questioning his accuracy. I'm not even questioning his toughness, okay? Which is what I tried to tell to my man Tom Waddle the other day. I'm not questioning his toughness because I knew he played behind suspect offensive line, numerous offensive coordinators, numerous coaches. But why it's that? Because organizations that have Jay Cutler as your quarterback are constantly trying to figure out an infrastructure that will best maximize his potential because they see the potential, but it never reaches fruition. You know why, Jeff Saturday? Because I can make a legitimate argument based on pictures, based on body language, based on attitude, based on results. I can make a legitimate argument that he probably doesn't give a damn about anything but his check, which is what makes him the worst and why I wouldn't want him as a starter.
Question is, how much is Cutler worth? You know, Molly asked a double-barrel question. Should anyone go for him? Let me answer. Should anyone go for him first? The answer is yes. And the teams that should go for him are teams that need a tackling dummy plus. Rebuilding teams that need the best talent they can find at the position. Behind bad offensive lines, the guy might take a beating, right? He's no spring chicken. I agree with Stephen A. He hasn't exhibited the leadership qualities to win a Super Bowl. Okay, but he has some talent. He's better. He's like a middle-of-the-pack quarterback minus the leadership. So who is that? That's a team like the Browns or a team like the 49ers, a tackling dummy plus on a short-term deal. Sure, he's starter caliber in terms of the numbers he'll put up. Now, the question is, what's he worth? Well, if you're a rebuilding team, I wouldn't want to give up a fourth-round pick or higher because I want those resources put into rebuilding the team. But a fifth-round pick, if I was competing against another team who offered a sixth and I had to offer a fifth to get him, fifth-round pick, I would probably go as high as that were I the Browns or the Niners. That's it. Stopgap measure for a rebuilding program, not a high draft pick because you need that to rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, I like your thought process, and I agree with you. I would probably go a little higher. I'd probably go fourth round, potential third round, and below, and here's why. But I do agree with you. You talk about a team like the 49ers. Talk about a team, the Jets. I mean, the Jets could be a team, right? And he is Fitzpatrick-like, I understand. Like, if you compare those two, they can be that. What he has to have and what he is going to require is a locker room that's already strong. That there is leadership that's already in the locker room. The part that concerns you with the leaderless part that Stephen A. is bringing up, you don't want people to copy that. You don't want that to be mimicked
in a rebuilding program, in other words. Yeah, you need veterans.
Yeah, you need some guys in there to say, hey, man, here's how we work, right? He might not work that way, right? He may not do this, but there's somebody behind him who is. There are some quarterbacks that you have in your tank. You may draft them, whatever it is, going to give you that year or two to kind of buffer, and I completely agree. But he also has to have a coach. The problem with Cutler isn't his talent, and it's not the leader part. It's he turns the ball over. I mean, it is ridiculous. Like, some of the decision-making just confuses the daylights out of you as an offensive player. You don't understand why he's trying to do it. I mean, I'd watch Bear film, and there's clearly a read that he should be going to, and he's trying to make a dime throw in the middle of the field. I don't understand it. I don't know why he does it. But if you could find a coach who harnesses that part, he gives you enough plus from the talent perspective that you can win games. You can be a playoff caliber team with him. And the problem I see with the NFL right now, supply and demand. And the reality is there's not a lot of good quarterbacks in our game. And as you're looking at it, to find someone who does have that talent, again,
and he's 33. It's not like
Can
he's
I say
too
something?
old.
If he was a leader,
I mean, Tony Romo's 37.
and he's not your franchise guy.
And if he was a leader, he wouldn't be available.
Exactly. Yeah. He wouldn't be getting shopped if he wasn't doing that. But at some point, there are a lot of teams. I mean, if you're the bottom 15 down and you don't got a for sure QB, I mean, and you get it for a fourth round or fifth round, it may be a good buffer.
Let me tell you the part about this conversation that's bothering me. First of all, I appreciate the breakdown and the cerebral approach to dissecting what Jay Cutler's value is. I get that. I could have done that myself. I choose not to. You know why? Because we pick and choose who we want to do that for. Let's say, for the sake of argument, if this was Terrell Owens. Now, granted, we talk about wide receiver as opposed to quarterback. But if this was Terrell Owens, this is a dude that's a Hall of Famer that can't get in.
For sure.
Because of the impact he has on a locker room. So what I have a problem with is somebody like a Jeff Saturday who knows his football. Somebody like a Max Kellerman who is as intelligent as they come. Sitting there and shoving that aside and just dissecting it from a football perspective. But how many athletes have we seen come down the pike and we're gauging and judging their impact on the troops around them, the people inside that locker room? We got a guy like Terrell Owens who is left out of the Hall of Fame, 153 career touchdowns, 15,934 receiving yards, top 3 all time.
He should be
but
in the
we're going to
Hall of
talk about
Fame.
him being a cancer.
For sure.
But we're going to dissect Jay Cutler, just football, and ignore the
can't still make it right.
that he's had.
But here's the thing you don't see, Stephen A., is he's not the leader, so no one's looking to him to be that. He doesn't perform like T.O.
No one was looking at T.O. either.
So they did, because the way he performed, it gave him credibility in the locker room.
Okay.
Jay Cutler's not bringing credibility to the locker room. He's just bringing, he is a performance guy. That's it.
I can accept
Bottom
that.
line.
I can accept that.
Welcome back into another hour of First Take. The guy's a little feisty, but I'm not mad at it on a Wednesday. Stephen A., what can we expect in hour number 2, my friend?
More magic, a beautiful final take that I can't wait to deliver, and of
Beautiful.
course, a question about what role should Kobe Bryant play with the Lakers and whether or not the players should want him to. Hour number 2 up next. First Take. Come holler.
Plus, Jimmy Garoppolo sounds like he's trying to get paid and not stick around, which is usually a good idea. Maybe not this time. First Take, hour number 2, right now.
That's true. 3 takes, not me. 2 takes if you lucky. First take, you got me.
All right, so after coming off a franchise worst 17-65 season and missing the playoffs for 3 straight seasons, the longest postseason drought in franchise history, Jeannie Buss finally made the move that fans have been clamoring for, firing her brother Jim Buss as executive vice president of basketball operations and also releasing longtime GM Mitch Kupchak, who's been with the team for 30 years. After the firing, she did the hiring of one Magic Johnson, who is now the Lakers president of basketball operations. Just last week, he paid a visit to good old Bristol and talked about bringing big names back to the Lake Show.
Guys are going to want to come play. No. Because I know business. I know how to win. And I'm going to tell you something about the Lakers that's different from any other organization. You put that purple and gold on. Right now, we're third.
Yep.
Third worst.
No, third in when you talk about sports paraphernalia, T-shirts and all of that.
Still, right?
Can't buy a win, still third, yeah.
Still third,
that's
right?
impressive, yeah.
When you think about that brand, it's a worldwide brand.
It sure is, Stephen A., but we know the city of L.A. also likes winners. So how long before Magic gets the Lakers in championship form?
You know what? I'm going to give it about 3 years because I think they're going to be a bevy of free agents who are available who will strongly consider coming to play for the Los Angeles Lakers. And I think that the difference between Magic Johnson and a lot of these other teams is that he's going to get one of these players. He's going to get a star to sign on to resurrect Lakers lore. That's what he's after. That's what he'll look to do. Magic Johnson wants, he sits there and talks about it, it's not Showtime, but he's only talking about the culture in terms of the culture that exists today compared to what it was. But understand, Magic understands that Los Angeles expects a show. It matters to Lakers Nation. It's not just about winning. It's about having the kind of athletes that can give you a show. And he's going to be looking for that. And the opportunity to bring somebody to Hollywood and hand them the reins and to say, lead this show into the new era of Lakers lore. That's something that's going to be, as far as I'm concerned, incredibly appealing. Remember, back in the day when Magic Johnson was first drafted, the Lakers had an opportunity to grab him or Sidney Moncrief. They picked Irvin Magic Johnson. Sidney Moncrief was a fabulous collegiate player, but what he wasn't was Showtime. He was better than average. He was good, close to great. He could put up points. He could make things happen, but he wasn't Showtime. He didn't give you a reason to walk through the turnstiles and fill up those seats. Magic Johnson not only looking for that marquee player, he's looking for that marquee attraction. And if you are a player that has an opportunity to get handed those reins by the Los Angeles Lakers, that's a huge, huge deal for you in Hollywood. And I think that's going to be their selling point. And somewhere along the line, I think he's going to pull it off. It's just a matter of how soon he's going to do it.
I'm going to speak for Lakers fans right now. I did a radio show out there with Marcellus Wiley for almost 6 years. The reason that Lakers fans want to compete for a championship is because you can't three-peat. You can't start a dynasty until you win the first one. They are not interested in just being good and entertaining and maybe competing and one day winning a championship. This is by far the #1 basketball brand in the history of the known universe. I know the Celtics have one more championship win than the Lakers do, but the vast majority of them took place in the pre-modern era. The Lakers have won 10 championships since Magic Johnson came into the league, by far the most. Now, Lakers fans want dynasties. They're not interested in being the New York Knicks of the 90s and maybe one day making it to the finals or being the Phoenix Suns. Look at that. We're on SportsCenter all the time. We're scoring a lot of points, but we don't win championships or even doing that and winning one. They want a reign of terror. They want the rest of the league to look and go, damn, it's unfair how good the Lakers are. That's why when you see the tandems that have won in modern Lakers history, it's Magic and Kareem. There were lots of good free agents, lots of all-stars. Magic and Kareem. It's so Kobe and Shaq. Kobe and Shaq. It is 3 years. This is the reason.
Correct.
Now, if they would have done something stupid and gone all in on DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge or Carmelo Anthony, which they tried, that would have been a bad mistake because they would have been mired in cap problems and not good enough to win a championship. In fact, they didn't. So they gave 4-year deals to Mozgov and Luol Deng. In 2 years, those will be expiring contracts. You can move them. Good. That coincides with the development of a nucleus who I would say includes not only Jordan Clarkson, who's locked up, but D'Angelo Russell, Larry Nance Jr., Julius Randle, and Brandon Ingram. Of those 5, you'll be able to see who's a keeper, who you can trade, who will attract other players, who develops, etc. You'll make a decision on a couple of those guys. You'll get rid of the expiring contracts, and you'll be able to sign real marquee franchise cornerstone level free agents, and I do not mean LaMarcus Aldridge, who's an excellent player. I mean Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal. I'm talking about the prime-time best players in the world. It is, and that's if everything goes right, Stephen A. That means they got to stink the rest of the year, keep their top 3 pick this year, their first rounder in 2019, decide right on every young player they have, clear the decks of the bad contracts, and convince the marquee free agents to come along. Now, that's a lot. Magic can do it. Magic and Genie can absolutely get it done. But even Dr. Jerry Buss, the late, greatest owner in the history of American team sports, will tell you, you need to take risks, you need to get a little lucky, you need to be really smart. They need all those things, and then maybe in 3 years can they not only contend for a championship, but set themselves up going forward to reestablish the Lakers at their rightful position, #1 in the basketball universe.
You've made it far too complicated. You say 3 years. I say 3 years because I think that's what it's going to take for you to attract that free agent that you want, who's also box office. But monetarily speaking, one of the things that you've forgotten to mention is the fact that the new TV money, the elevation of the salary cap, those obviously gives you additional flexibility that you don't have to wait 3 years down the line for. The cap went up significantly this summer. It's going up again this coming summer. The Los Angeles Lakers are committed to just $80 million next season, $47 million a year after that. That's less than 3 years. That's number one. Number two, and more importantly, even though you've got that money, and that, again, is very, very paramount, the key is being able to attract an individual because your franchise has been resurrected in the eyes of Joe Public as in terms of having the credibility that it needs. You can dissect it all you want to, but in the end, all it takes is the arrival of one willing to establish the mantle, and then all of a sudden everything else falls in place. When LeBron James decided to go to Miami, dudes were willing to follow and take less. When he went to Cleveland, dudes were willing to follow and take less. You didn't have to do that in Golden State, but Golden State is elevating itself to a point where you may have individuals like the David West of the world who's willing to go there and take less just because he wants a legitimate shot at a ring. Those kind of things can potentially happen if one person is willing to show up and carry the mantle. I think that's what this comes down to.
Well, I want to continue this conversation because when Magic was in town, we also asked him if he was in charge, which he is. Would you want Kobe Bryant involved? And Magic said this.
First call I'll make if I'm in charge, Kobe Bryant. Because Kobe understands winning. He understands also these players, you know. And so I would call, what role you want, bro? Give me, if you got a day, just give me that day. I take that. Whatever time he has, I want him to come and be a part of it.
Well, first of all, I spoke to Kobe Bryant. Whatever Magic Johnson and the Lakers need, he will do that. Let's make sure we get that out the way. Yeah. He's a Laker for life. That's what Kobe is going to do, whatever he can to help.
Max.
Yeah.
Should the Lakers players want Kobe around?
First of all, I love when Lakers legends try to be slick because it is a family-owned business, and that's such a Lakers inside family job. When Magic Johnson shows up going, if I'm given the job, the first call I'll make is to Kobe. Let me tell you how to read that. I got the job. I already called Kobe. That's what that means to me. And should the Lakers want Kobe involved? It's a moot point because Kobe's got his hooks into the team already. Pelinka, his agent and business partner, is going to be the GM. Magic Johnson's already on national TV talking about, I'm going to say, Kobe, whatever you want. Kobe Bryant is involved. Whether or not that's a good thing remains to be seen. In this iteration of the team, with these players, in this version of the team, maybe not, because he already played with them to the detriment of their winning, although it helped their draft position. But the fact is, going forward, it will not be this iteration of the team. It will be something else. And then the question becomes, Kobe, now that he's not on the floor taking all the shots as a diminished version of himself, is he seen by other stars around the league as something that they want to be around? Let me learn that next level intensity from this guy. Or is he seen as someone who's going to be such a taskmaster, so the way great players and sometimes are not great coaches because they expect so much from others, is he going to be like that and demoralize them? I suspect that over time, Kobe Bryant will have great value to the Lakers. I wonder if that value shows up right away or if that works against the Lakers in the short run as memories of Kobe the player and the kind of taskmaster he was are still fresh in players' minds.
Once again, far more complicated than necessary. If Kobe Bryant, if you are a player and you want to be great, you want Kobe Bryant around. If you're not committed to greatness, he's the last person you want to be around. You do not want to be around this man if you are happy getting a check and showing up to work, doing your job and going home.
He ain't the guy for you, right?
If you ain't putting in the extra work, if you are not committed to greatness, if you are not willing to make the necessary sacrifices, you don't want to be around Kobe. You don't want to be around Kobe. And by the way, I'm a witness to this. You don't want to be around Kobe no matter what you're doing if you ain't trying to be great at what you do. He just doesn't have any respect for you. He doesn't have any respect for anybody that's not trying to establish themselves at elite in whatever their chosen profession is. He's got a problem with you. That's his M.O.
But Stephen A., so did Magic.
How he's built.
So did Magic, but Magic has the following ability, which is why I think it's very good he's president of basketball operations, or potentially very good. We'll see how he does. Magic has the ability, I've seen this many times, he can walk into a room and make everybody in that room want to be the best versions of themselves. He uplifts those around him, the way LeBron James does on a team. Kobe is much more like Michael Jordan or Larry Bird, which is, it's going to be his way, and it's not about uplifting you. It's almost about scaring you, and leading by example. Like, you got to grind for this. It's a different kind of personality.
Actually, Kobe is not like Michael Jordan. And the reason why he's not like Michael Jordan is that Michael Jordan commanded more respect than resentment. Michael didn't care whether you resented him or not, but that was because Michael was more personable. And you were supposed to understand what he was about, while at the same time he was personable, and you got to ultimately be held accountable for what you do and you don't do. Kobe is different. Even though Michael Jordan was that way as a competitor himself, Kobe is damn near animalistic in regards to everything that involves his time and his energy. He's not that guy. Michael could step back and relax on certain issues, in certain ways, on certain things. That ain't Kobe. Michael Jordan threw a fabulous party during NBA All-Star Weekend, flew in just for the party, and then left the next morning. You don't find Kobe. Kobe didn't have to be here. Kobe ain't going to be here. Kobe don't want to mingle. Kobe ain't that dude. Kobe is all about whatever. He literally epitomizes what my pastor, A.R. Bernard, at Christian Cultural Center in Brooklyn, New York, always says about men: mission-minded. That's what Kobe is. Everything is a mission. Everything.
And we'll see
how you ain't about the mission.
We'll see how he is in the front office. But I was in D.C. with Michael Jordan's last year with the Wizards. He demoralized that team in the locker room, and I saw it. And Michael Jordan's the greatest player who ever lived. And Kobe Bryant is almost an exact replica of Michael Jordan on the court. He's as close to Jordan as you can get. On the court. On the court. And I also saw him demoralize a Lakers team the last couple of years of his team. I mean, like, these are the greatest players ever, but they expect from others the kind of work they put in. And you're right, Stephen A., that's not for everybody. It'll separate the men from the boys, but it also may dissuade some players who just have a different kind of personality, the way they want to go about their business, maybe from joining the Lakers, at least in the short run. It's going to be interesting to see.
Warriors head coach Steve Kerr has been very outspoken on political and social issues and has received his fair share of backlash for it. And he's not paying the criticism any mind. Kerr saying he's not just going to stick to sports. If you stick to that mantra, then everybody should stick to what they're doing, right? That means nobody's allowed to have a political opinion. It just so happens we get these microphones stuck in our face and we have a bigger platform. But it's free speech. And if you look at the history of the world, the biggest problems come when people don't speak. A lot of us feel strongly about our need to speak out on justice, and I think it's important. Max?
Yep.
Is Steve Kerr right?
Of course he's right. And I'm broadly sympathetic to those who, even when they watch this show, say, look, I watch sports to escape this kind of stuff, the real world. I want distraction. I get that. The old saying is a sports show should be like a bar. You know, you don't go in and talk religion or politics because it can be divisive. I am sympathetic to that. But these are strange and dangerous times. And it's more important than ever that citizens get informed and follow their consciences. And if you look at the history of sports, Hank Greenberg, Detroit superstar, Detroit Tigers slugging superstar, enlists publicly in the Army after Pearl Harbor. You could say, well, that's patriotic. Sure, but political activism and awareness is patriotic. Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jim Brown joined others to support Muhammad Ali at a time where his political awareness and activism was very important in the civil rights movement and beyond. This is nothing new in our sporting landscape. And so I applaud Steve Kerr for this. He's absolutely right. Get informed, follow your conscience. He's leading by example, particularly in a world and in a culture, American culture. What we export more than anything is our culture around the world still. And particularly in America, our sports culture, the figures there are disproportionately famous and influential. And if they are so moved, especially nowadays, they should use it. I applaud Steve Kerr, Greg Popovich, and others.
Well, first of all, I agree with you. And I appreciate your latter points about what our culture is all about and what we export, because that's absolutely true. Steve Kerr's a good man. Steve Kerr is not just an outstanding coach. He's not just a champion as a player, but he's somebody, regardless of the fact that I didn't believe that Mark Jackson should have ever lost his job. I certainly have no problem with Steve Kerr being the one that benefited from it because he deserves it. And he's done an outstanding job and has established himself as one of the premier coaches in basketball, and he deserves credit. But also he deserves credit because he's a genuinely decent man, a decent human being who's not a fake. He isn't somebody that's just speaking about it because he's trying to join the chorus or anything like that. He's always been an intellectual to some degree. He's always been conscientious. We all know him to be that, and we also know the story about how his dad, who was an ambassador, ultimately was murdered by terrorists. So we know his story, and obviously it hits him in ways that it doesn't hit most of us because it directly affected him for the rest of his life. Just to walk around on a day-to-day basis, no matter how wonderful your life is, knowing that on Father's Day, for example, or any other day of the year, you don't have your father around because a terrorist murdered him is something that's incredibly profound. So I take his words very, very serious. I have no problem with what he said. He's absolutely right, and we should applaud his position. The only thing that I would say, however, is that while we're sitting here and doing that as it pertains to Steve Kerr, I'll piggyback off of what you ultimately ended the conversation with on your part, Max, and that is this. If you're going to speak about something, have the decency to try, attempt to educate yourself on the issues rather than just trying to wax poetically about something you don't know anything about at all. Don't do that. Because now you veered the conversation in a different direction and have positioned yourself where you can get attacked. And let me take myself, for example, Max. One of the things that people don't appreciate about me, particularly in the African-American community, I get a lot of love, don't get me wrong, and my brothers and sisters love me, and I love them back. But one of the things that goes widely unrecognized about me is that even though I speak on an abundance of issues, I don't pretend to know everything. I know what I don't know, and I'm willing to acknowledge it. But what I will do is touch on it to be a provocateur of thought so somebody else can take off that softball that I lobbed up in the air and knock it out the park with their level of intelligence, their information, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes it takes somebody being in the forefront, willing to give a spark plug to the conversation so dialogue can disseminate to the masses and other more informed and intelligent voices can take it to another level. You're not always the finished product just because you're touching on something. Sometimes we might touch on things intimately and with depth, and then other times we might touch on it on a surface level just to engage folks in conversation so they can take it to another level, thereby forcing us all to have a conversation that needs to be had. And I think that's the kind of thing that Steve Kerr is alluding to. I applaud him for it. I happen to talk to owner Joe Lacob on occasion for the Golden State Warriors. Whenever I see him, Bob Myers, the general manager, Golden State Warriors are a first-class organization. They don't all think alike. They have very different beliefs, but they come together for a common goal, and they respect each other's point of view. And that dialogue is what makes them a first-class organization because they're able to take all things into account, and that makes them that much more formidable because they think about everything. And it ain't just on the court. It's beyond. And that's why Steve Kerr should be commended for this because he's an extension of a culture that we should all be proud of that's taking place in the Golden State.
And my point that you talked about citizens being informed is important. We both supported Colin Kaepernick months ago until he said there was no difference in candidates. He's not going to vote. And he showed up with a Castro T-shirt, and that's when you say time out. Got to be better informed than that. And if you think you are informed and those are the conclusions you reach, those conclusions will be criticized. And the fact that when Steve Kerr and Greg Popovich, for that matter, because he immediately jumps to mind, when they speak about these things, they appear to be informed and have reached rational conclusions. Not that I agree with them, but that they are well-informed conclusions is important. Particularly nowadays, ignorance is not an excuse. People need to get informed.
Trade rumors have been swirling around Patriots backup quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy G was on Adam Schefter's podcast yesterday and, like a true Patriot, said he was trying to ignore the noise.
For the most part, I'm just trying to stay, as level-headed, trying not to think about it, overthink it too much. Because, at the end of the day, I'm still under contract. It's not my decision if I get traded or if I don't. So, just try and take it all in stride. When you really start thinking about it, your head will start spinning.
Garoppolo also told Schefter, which I find very funny, that his parents are all over the trade rumors, all over the internet, making it difficult for him to completely ignore the noise. You never stop being mom, I guess. Should Jimmy G insist on a trade to get out of New England?
Almost any other time, I would say yes, because you can't pass up on tens of millions of dollars that would come along with it. And the Patriots can't afford to pay him that, right, and keep him on the bench. In this case, this is one of the rare cases, I would say, you wait on the money, which I can't believe those words are coming out of my mouth. But I believe that Tom Brady will fall off the cliff. I believe it will happen before the end of this upcoming season. But even if I'm wrong and he's in a steady decline for, let's say, 3 more years and breaks every record of longevity known to man, you want to develop under Tom Brady and Bill Belichick and play for the Patriots and maybe go to the Hall of Fame one day? Or do you, and by the way, get rich? Or do you want to make a cash grab, go to another team, and who knows what happens? And I think Jimmy Garoppolo is for real. Based on what I've seen so far, he looks really good. I don't know how much better you can look in a short audition. He won both games, and he looked good doing it. But apparently, maybe injury prone. I mean, he gets hurt in 2 games. And there's always the potential for a career-ending injury, even in a practice. I mean, it's a full-contact sport. So normally I would say you got to go get the money. In this case, try to be the next Aaron Rodgers, Stephen A.
But, Max, are we sure that that's even an option for him to take over as the Patriots quarterback? Are we even sure that Bill Belichick looks at him as the future?
That is assuming Bill Belichick looks at him that way. The difficulty in talking about moves Bill Belichick will make, because he's both the GM and the head coach and more successful at both than anyone maybe ever, is it's tough to question the logic and the wisdom of the moves. So, right, if Bill Belichick does move him, tough to say he should have been the quarterback of the future, although he spent a 2nd-round pick on him. If he gets a 1st-rounder back, he's already improved his lot, and the assumption that Jimmy G is going to want him to take the money like everyone else who's ever lived may force Belichick's hand there.
The question was, should Garoppolo wait or insist on a trade now? The answer is yes, because now is when the suckers are everywhere, looking at 94 career passes, looking at 2 games this year, and saying to themselves, excuse me, 43 or 63, 68% of his passes were completed, over 500 yards in 2 games. This dude's the truth. We want him. We're willing to give up whatever we can to get him. This is the height of his value. Now, could it be higher down the line? Maybe, if Tom Brady gets hurt or Tom Brady decides to retire. Last time we looked at Tom Brady, he was pretty damn healthy, winning his 5th career Super Bowl championship and passing for over 400 yards in the process, and telling not just the world, but his beautiful supermodel wife, sorry, honey, I know you want me to retire. Ain't happening. I'm having entirely too much fun. I expect and intend to do this for years to come. That is Jimmy Garoppolo should have had that ringing in his ear. Not only that, let's also keep in mind, when it's about the money, the Patriots ain't the place to go for it. Patriots aren't known for paying their guys. Tom Brady gets paid, but most others don't. A matter of fact, they get shipped off before their time is due to get paid, because that's not how Bill Belichick rolls. And even in the case of Tom Brady has religiously restructured his salary, cut his salary. Modifications have been taking place all over the place, because Tom Brady loves being a Patriot. He loves being there. They love having him there, and he's willing to sacrifice his dollars just to be happy in the place where he's at. All of those things work against Jimmy Garoppolo staying in New England. He should get the hell up out of there quick, fast, and in a hurry, because he supposedly wants to be a football player and a quarterback in the National Football League, and that ain't going to happen anytime soon in New England.
His value may be peak at the moment or in the near future in terms of what the Patriots can get for him on the trade market. I don't know that his value is peak for him in terms of the money he can get right now. Not sure about that. I don't think a team is going to...
What I'm saying is, if you're not playing, Max, and let's say, for example, hypothetically speaking, let's just say, for example, that Jimmy Garoppolo is there for the next year or 2, but doesn't play it down, because Tom Brady plays all 16 games, and the only time you see Jimmy Garoppolo is in preseason. I would make the argument, how would his value elevate, and he hasn't been in a real game for a year or 2 because Tom Brady's still playing?
I'll make the argument that shrewd teams will look at that and say Belichick wanted to keep him. We saw what he did in those 2 games when he got action. We can see him in the preseason, and he's had 2 more years of development under the greatest coach and quarterback maybe who ever
better
lived.
than that. You know, I got you here. This is how you're not telling the truth. Because you know as well as I do that businesses, no matter how much your value is valued and elevated, businesses find a way to devalue you at every turn when it comes to the money. So if you're sitting on a bench, you might be right in terms of how they respect him and how they're looking at him. I'm talking about what they will conceivably do to use as an excuse to minimize the monetary commitment they normally would have to give him. You can't pull off now what you'd be able to pull off 2 years from now if he doesn't play.
I disagree. The quarterback market is always going to be the same, because this idea that there aren't enough quarterbacks to go around is not because there aren't enough good quarterbacks. There are tons of good quarterbacks. It's because they're compared to one another, and in any population, you can put them on a bell curve. Some will be over here really, really good. Most will be in the middle.
But
some will be really, really
Jimmy
bad compared to their peers. Therefore, there will always be jobs available, and people's imaginations will run away with them remembering what he did in those 2 games.
So, in other words, you're trying to tell me, I just want to be clear. Yep. What you're trying to say, Max Kellerman, is that if Jimmy Garoppolo, I'm speaking hypothetically, we obviously know they would pay him now.
Sure.
Okay, we both concede that now. But what you're saying is, if Jimmy Garoppolo rode the bench for the next 2 years because Tom Brady is healthy and is playing every game, you're telling me that teams would look at that and ignore it based on the 2 games they saw from this year, 2 years from now, and still give him money?
Best way I can answer that, Stephen A., you're a GM. He's available in 2 years, 2 more years tutelage under Brady and Belichick. You give him money, yes or no? More or less than
I'm not giving him the
now.
money I would give him now.
You
That's
give
my
more
point.
money
I'm not
now?
giving him the money I would give him now.
Okay, we agree to disagree.
I'm not giving him the money I would give him now.
DeSean Jackson is a free agent this offseason after spending the last 3 years with the Redskins. He was on Adam Schefter's podcast yesterday and was asked about the possibility of returning to the Eagles, the team he played his first 6 seasons before he was then released by head coach Chip Kelly, obviously coach at the time.
It definitely is a great story. And then, I mean, I guess you can say, starting your career somewhere and obviously going to a division rival team and, having the possibility of maybe going back. I mean, you just kind of think about all that, but you started somewhere and maybe would want to finish it.
Could all come full circle, folks. Jackson also said his number 1 priority was to play with a great quarterback, and he can play for another 4 to 6 years. Stephen A., should Jackson want to return to Philadelphia?
I think he should. Because you got to remember, working in Philadelphia for the Philadelphia Inquirer for years, I covered DeSean Jackson. I know him well. And I'm here to tell you, he never wanted to leave Philadelphia. He was forced out by Chip Kelly, unceremoniously, so I might add. As far as I was concerned, the Eagles organization, probably Chip Kelly himself, literally tried to sabotage this man's career because if you recall, when they let him go, there was a whole bunch of stuff being said about him before he was able to latch on to the Washington Redskins. So it came across as literally the Philadelphia Eagles trying to get in the way of this man continuing his career in the National Football League. Then I sat down for an exclusive one-on-one interview with him for SportsCenter, and we talked about those things. That was a couple of years ago, and I did the interview in Miami. He never wanted to leave Philadelphia. He wanted to be there. That was his home. He loves those folks there, and he definitely has a lot of love for Jeffrey Lurie because Jeffrey Lurie is a first-class individual. But the fan base in Philadelphia, what they meant to him, how he connected with them, and what have you, all of those things are things that he still remembers. Now, before, if you think about it, we look at a guy like Jordan Matthews, and we say, okay, where's the other receiver? I mean, Aguilar's getting benched for crying out loud, and there's nobody else worth mentioning, and we don't know what happened to Zach Ertz and Brent Selleck at the tight end spot. They just evaporated. We didn't know what happened to them this year, but we know this much. If DeSean Jackson is in your lineup, you have a deep threat. If you have a deep threat, you can't suffocate the line the way that you do. You've got to drop back into that secondary. He's going to command attention. That's going to open things up for Jordan Matthews. That's going to open things up for Ertz and Zellick. It's definitely going to open things up for Carson Wentz, and it may very well open things up for your running game. You take all of those things into consideration, it would be an ideal landing spot because even though you can't poo-poo what you've seen from Kirk Cousins, you got a lot of people, probably DeSean Jackson as well, who firmly believe he's very, very good at padding his numbers, but does he show up when it counts most? Already after a rookie year, We don't really say that about Carson Wentz. He seems to have the guts to pull it off. So we'll see.
Seemed to go pretty well in Washington, so that remains. I don't see why he'd necessarily want to leave. Deshaun Jackson seemed to fit there. They have a pretty good team. That said, going back to Philadelphia is a great idea for Deshaun Jackson should he not wind up back in Washington, back in D.C. Look, Philadelphia was a Chip Kelly issue. Chip Kelly's gone. What does Deshaun Jackson care at this point? And when you look at that quarterback, at Carson Wentz, let's see what he can do with a guy who can take the lid off of defense, right? He's missing dynamic offensive options. We don't know really who's better between Dak Prescott and Carson Wentz yet, do we? You know, Dak Prescott has walked the walk. He's had a great offensive line and weapons and everything. Carson Wentz hasn't done that because he really hasn't had the weapons. But they have a pretty good offensive line. They have a really good defense, potentially. I mean, they have things and a promising young quarterback in Wentz who just looks like the real deal, and we've seen flashes of it last year. You give him a guy who can get behind that defense, an outside threat, who knows? But I'm really curious to see it. And if, as you say, Stephen A., Deshaun Jackson never wanted to leave, well, then he's coming back to a Chip Kelly-less situation, really with a much better long-term team in terms of their long-term prospects to succeed. So I think really it's the opposite of a dilemma, a choice between two bad options. I think Deshaun Jackson here has a choice between two great options.
You also got to remember, Deshaun Jackson was needed more in Philadelphia. This kid Crowder came on strong for the Washington Redskins last year. Jordan Reed is an absolute stud when healthy. There's been a new sighting for Vernon Davis at the tight end spot. You got to take that along with the fact that Pierre Garçon and both Deshaun Jackson are obviously free agents. And then you got that kid out of TCU, Doxson, that they had drafted. So all those things considered, he's needed more in Philadelphia. And I think Deshaun Jackson is at that point in his career where he wants to be needed.
Sure.
He wants to feel
and you draft
needed
a dynamic
and
running
that resonates
back
as well.
You signed Deshaun Jackson in Philly, draft a dynamic running back or somehow acquire one, you're off to the races.
And he says he wants to play with a great quarterback, so clearly he thinks Carson Wentz is if he wants to go to Philly. That's what we're gathering
and
from
Kirk
that.
Cousins could play. We're not acting like Kirk Cousins can't play, but he's more needed in Philly than he is in D.C.
Luke is today's player's coach.
That's right.
See, he understands the offense that he needs to run. He can bring out the talent of these guys in terms of running that offense because players want to be put in a position that they can win. Luke Walton can put them in that position. He's a winner. And so I think that I'm looking forward to working with him, and guys respect him.
The new Lakers president of basketball operations, Magic Johnson, saying he's a big fan of head coach Luke Walton during an appearance on our show last week. Walton is 19-39 in his first season as the Lakers coach, the second worst record in the Western Conference, third worst in the league. But last season, when filling in for Steve Kerr, Walton took the Warriors, obviously, to a much better team, of course, to a 39-4 record. Max, should Magic keep Walton?
Oh, yeah. This is not only a no-brainer, but this is a happy circumstance. They have him to a long-term, expensive deal, so you don't want to get rid of him. You're financially incentivized to keep him. But in addition to that, if you had a coach you didn't like and you got rid of him, you know who you'd target? Luke Walton. Yes. Everything Magic just said, the players like him. He understands the modern NBA offense. By the way, for L.A., he's a former Lakers champion. And for California and for the NBA, he's on the Warriors coaching tree. You just mentioned, Molly, 39-4. I mean, I don't care who you're coaching. You know what you're doing. You just getting out of your own way to go 39-4 is worth something. But it's much more than that. Magic was here telling us he's a gym rat. The players love him, etc. He also has the support, by the way, you would think of Kobe Bryant, a former teammate, and of others. Meta World Peace told me that having him, even as a player, was like having a coach on the bench when he sat next to him. For all those reasons, absolutely yes. You not only keep Luke Walton, you're happy you have him.
Totally agree with you. Look, the biggest thing is this. Let's just go out on a limb and say it. This 19-39 record that the Lakers have, that ain't Luke Walton's fault. I promise you that. It ain't because of him. I mean, just look at their roster. Look at the roster that Jim Buss, had Mitch Kupchak assemble. Julius Randle, he can play, but he needs to be ambidextrous. He can only use his left. Jordan Clarkson is a nice guy and a good player, but he's undersized as a two-guard. Nick Young, swaggy P, a little bit more focused this year, but he's still swagging. Okay, so, again, he's a role player who can play. You look at D'Angelo Russell, doesn't appear to be that dude yet. He can play the game of basketball, but you need to see more from him. They got requisite parts that you could build upon, guys that deserve to be on an NBA roster, but they don't really have much to legitimately be a bona fide team in the NBA. You look at a Luke Walton, he ingratiates himself with guys. He knows today's players. He knows today's system. He was a part of the system that everybody else seems to be trying to mirror. And on top of it all, he's young, and he absolutely loves being in the gym. All those things are pivotal, and not only that, this wasn't a Jim Buss pick alone. This was a Jeannie Buss pick. She wanted him, so she wanted him. Kobe supported her wanting him. And now Magic's in tow. You got the right coach because you got a guy that's supported by the infrastructure that the Lakers presently have. And that's the most important thing. There's not going to be any indecision whatsoever. Everybody seems to be aligned with one another. That's very important.
To your point earlier in the show, Stephen A., we talked about it. Having the kind of team that stars want to play in, system that stars want to play in. That's Luke Walton. He had these baby Lakers who are clearly not ready, looking like a bubble playoff team through the first 20 or so games. That's a good coach. Yep. I mean, they don't have the legs, they don't have the stamina or the wherewithal yet, but that's a good coach.
A lot of example, I was watching the Lakers play against Portland a couple of weeks ago when I was in L.A., and there was a rebound that took place, and I'm sorry, not Damian Lillard. I got brain lock right now, but he got the ball and he stepped behind the 3-point line. That's right. Yep. And so what happens? McCollum, right? So what happens is that Julius Randle literally just walks towards him without his arms down, without his hands up, rather, not realizing, excuse me, C.J. McCollum is shooting the basketball. This brother can shoot. You might want to get out there and put a hand up. And so he lags getting out there, and McCollum shoots it there, hits the three, and he walks over to the bench, and it's Luke Walton waiting for him, getting on him the way a coach is supposed to. You got to watch that sometimes, and he does that now. You know, one of the most hilarious things I heard upon learning that Magic Johnson was not a president of basketball operations for the Los Angeles Lakers is people walking around acting like he was going to be comparable to Phil Jackson. You know who Phil Jackson is, right? That 11-time champion as a coach in Chicago and L.A. who went to the New York Knicks as president of basketball operations and suddenly has become as inept as you want to be. That Phil Jackson. Suddenly, that's who Magic Johnson is going to be. Well, let me tell y'all something right now. You got to worry about a lot of things about Magic Johnson. You got to worry about whether or not he's going to get a star. You got to worry about the ability to return the Lakers to championship glory. But the one thing you do not have to worry about when it comes to Earvin Magic Johnson is him being somebody comparable to Phil Jackson as an executive. And here is why. Magic actually wants this job. Phil never did. I'm going to say it before. I said it before, and I'm going to say it again. Phil Jackson never wanted the New York Knicks job. He laughed at the notion of being an executive for the New York Knicks. He laughed at the notion of being president of basketball operations under James Dolan because James Dolan kept throwing money in his direction, until finally Phil Jackson told confidants, look, I'm not that stupid. The man keeps throwing more money at me. What do you want me to do? I've got to take it. So in other words, this 11-time champion who made millions as a coach in Chicago and Los Angeles decided to go for a money grab in New York City. That is not Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson wants to be running the Lakers. He wants to be on the job. He shoved business opportunities aside. He's allocated responsibility to others, all because of the glory that the Los Angeles Lakers once held under his stewardship, by the way, and what he wants to return them to. That is what you want the leader of your franchise, the face of your franchise to be, not somebody who's walking around saying, damn, I'm getting paid, so I guess I got to act like I want the job. Y'all feel me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can sell out for the dough, but you can't get mad that people call you on it.
No question. And when there's a will, there's a way. And clearly one guy has that will, as Stephen A. just articulated, and one does not. Well done, Stephen A. We'll see you all tomorrow. Have a great day. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. Catch First Take weekdays, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific on ESPN.